Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Tonight I have joining me Paul Dame, who is the chair of the Vermont GOP, or Republican Party. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Pat.
Yeah,
It's
this
good
is
to be
so
back.
cool. Yeah, back from the convention. I can't wait to start talking about that. I told you I was yelling at home with you all. Wow, exciting!
Yeah.
It's just everybody was so revved up. It was amazing. But let's just do this logically here. If you could tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I grew up here in Vermont on a dairy farm. Went to school, went away to school for a couple of years, came back, graduated from UVM. And shortly after, my wife had a pretty traumatic car accident in Romania, where she was from. And so I had dealt with single-payer health care in Eastern Europe. And then we come back here, we get married. And that was sort of the issue that really got me involved in politics. And I said, I see what happens when healthcare is free and you get what you pay for. And I decided I was going to make sure that whole debacle, I could spend an hour talking about that.
Another show.
I wanted that to stay in our past, not be part of our future. So I started getting involved. I was interested in the presidential race in 2012, and Don Turner, the House Republican leader at the time, said, "Hey, have you thought about running for House?" And I didn't know anything. I didn't know how the districts worked, that you can have more than one person in a district. I knew absolutely nothing. But I worked with Don and Linda Myers, and they helped me get involved. And I lost my first time out in 2012, but came back. And in 2014, I defeated a 6-year incumbent.
Wow.
I'm still the only Republican to serve in that district in the last quarter century.
Good for you.
And then my family and I didn't want to rent anymore. We wanted to buy a house, and I couldn't afford one in the district I was in. So we moved out to St. George, Vermont, which is where I live now. And so I wasn't in the legislature anymore, but I started getting involved with the party. And then when the previous chair stepped down, I had been helping out a lot. And I thought, maybe this is an opportunity for me to serve kind of at the party level instead of at the legislative level. So I'm just halfway through my second term right now.
Excellent. Well, I know you're doing a good job because I hear it from everybody. So thank you.
Depends on who you ask.
Well, I
right?
know, of course, you can't keep everybody happy, Paul.
That's true. I once heard somebody say, if you don't have anyone complaining about you, you're not doing anything worth doing.
Exactly.
So.
You must be doing something wrong. So when they say chair, you pretty much you do everything, right?
Right now I do, yeah. That's one of the things that I've been trying to keep the party pretty lean, so that most of the money that's coming in is going towards supporting candidates or building building the party. We've done a lot of growth the past year here, getting candidates on the ballot, and that's one thing I hope we'll touch on. But it looks like we're on track to add 22 new House candidates after the primary, either through the write-in process or the appointment process. So that's what we're trying to do, and trying to build some centralized infrastructure that our candidates can leverage to help them with their races.
Excellent. And so we're in somewhat good shape, at least with the names on the ballot?
We're in better shape now. When we got to the end of May at the filing deadline, it was one of the smallest recruiting classes we'd ever had. I think we had 69 at one point. Maybe we added a couple extras there. But now we're up at 96, which is where we've been kind of historically, 98 to 90 in that range. And so we only need to win about 52% of our House seats to give the governor the power to sustain his veto.
Right.
I think our better opportunity is certainly going to be in the Senate. Thanks to the work from our incumbent senators on the last redistricting map, we've got a map that looks pretty good for us.
Excellent.
And we've got something happening this year that we haven't had happen very often. We've got Republican House members that are moving up to the Senate. A lot of Republicans, they'll serve 4, 6, 8 years, and they go back to their business, they go back to their family. A lot of Republicans don't see politics as a career ladder to climb. They see it as like working on the select board. You do your time, get off, give somebody else a turn.
Right.
So it's been great. We've got obviously Pat Brennan from Colchester. Scott Beck is running for Senate in Caledonia County. Chris Matos is running in the Chittenden North District. So we've got 3 cases where we've got good House reps that are moving up in very competitive Senate seats. And if we just win 4 of those Senate seats that we can flip, we can give Governor Scott the ability to sustain vetoes and force the Democrats to come back to the table. That's one
I don't think people realize how bad it is when you're a supermajority. And as a matter of fact, I spoke one time to Shap Smith when he was Speaker of the House, and I said, "Oh, you've got the supermajority. It says it's a breeze." He goes, "Oh no," he said. For him, it was harder because they are in a supermajority. They all expected they would go home with something, and in order to keep his folks happy, you had to see what they would want, but that's not as easy. But a supermajority just does its thing, and it doesn't listen.
Yeah. Well, and the advantage that Shap had too, because that's when I served when Shap was Speaker, is he also had a Democrat governor. So
Yeah, right, exactly.
there were much higher expectations
right.
over there. Now it seems as if Democrats are just trying to pass whatever else they think they can get to, and not really take any input from the governor, who's the most popular governor in the country. And just continue to ram legislation down the throat of the governor and the people of Vermont.
It's really bad.
It's got to stop.
Because,
that's why we're running this year.
You've got to have some kind of balance, because I've said this on this show, I don't know how many times. It's your bill, my bill, and the compromise bill. And that's always the best bill of all 3, is what you've worked together with. And you've got good ideas, I've got good ideas, and not everybody's thrilled, but they're all happy or pleased. And that's really how you should be running government. But now it's my bill or the highway.
Well, and that's the way things work at our local level, where I think our governance is the best. At the select board level, you don't have, it's always a lot of give and take. And you try to listen to other people, because they have a perspective and experience that you don't have. And you try to understand, all right, what's valuable in there that I can bring in that I'm missing just because I don't have those same experiences. And that whole dynamic is really missing right now with the supermajority and the way that supermajority has been led. It's really, we know what we're doing. Everybody else better get out of our way, get on board or get out of the way. And that's contrary to where I think most Vermonters are, especially as they interact with public service at the local level.
Right, exactly. I have a friend of mine who left the legislature last year. I won't say her name, but she left exactly because it's different. And she's a Democrat, but she said, this isn't what I signed up. It's not my way or the highway. She was one that would get input from all her committee, and the bills out of her committee were great bills.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that especially, so there's like the supermajority is one factor, and then the leadership is a different factor. I think unfortunately, Senate Pro Tem Philip Baruth has created a lot of his own problems with Democrats deciding not to come back this year. The way that he's handled the Senate has been very adversarial and not the same kind of collegial spirit that has existed in the past. The numbers are so pretty much similar. We've had 6 or 7 Republicans for a long time now. But there's something different in the way that Baruth has led.
Interesting.
And I think some Democrats who want that compromise, who want to work together, who really respect the value that Republicans bring to some of the conversations, those people feel like this isn't the place for me anymore.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. It's really a shame because we're losing a lot of the culture and a lot of the camaraderie, and
we're losing a lot of people in the middle.
And most of the people that I hung out with when I was in the legislature were Democrats. All the Democratic ladies. They brought me along as a token Republican, and we'd go out to dinner and stuff. And and I think that helped me when I would go before them to get bills passed for the governor.
Yeah.
And because they knew me and trusted me, and it's not that way anymore. I don't know that I'd love it so much anymore.
Yeah. It's a different.
So, and they're losing a lot of history. A lot of senior people are, And I know that the newbies that come on board, they just don't have that feeling of what the tradition is.
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of the new people, especially in the supermajority, are coming in as progressives,
Right.
but they run as Democrats because it's more convenient and more advantageous to them personally, and they're much more coming from an activist background rather than a public service background. It used to be that a lot of the people at the legislature were people that used to be on select board,
Yep,
development
right.
review
Right.
board, stuff like that. And now more and more you're starting to see people who have worked at some advocacy group, who, maybe they haven't been lobbyists, but they've been
Yep.
sort of that grassroots, you're trying to reach people.
Yep, right.
Those are the people who are coming in. So they've got a very different mindset about what is the purpose of public service. If you're coming at it from this perspective of a VPIRG or the Peace and Justice Center or something like that,
Right.
you've got a very narrow focus about what is good.
Right.
You're trying to do one thing, and anybody who stands in your way is your enemy. Where, again, if you're coming from that kind of more local collaborative model
Yep,
on the
right,
select
right.
board, it's like, hey, we've all got this problem. This problem affects all of us. There's probably a couple ways that we can fix it. How do we do that? And we're getting fewer of the latter kind of legislators
Make a
and
good
more
point.
and more of those
And
former.
my favorite was Lucy LaRiche from Planned Parenthood, really.
Yeah.
As we're voting on, on abortion issues, I thought, stop me if I'm wrong, but anyway, that was my favorite. Anyway, I just wanted to jump to the national because
Yeah.
our GOP came out with support of Donald Trump, and I was just a little surprised, only because the state voted for Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
And so how did that all come about? Well, obviously, I think the next day or the day after, she stepped away from the race.
Yeah,
Wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. So are you talking about the primary results
The
first?
primary,
Right, yeah,
she
so-
won here.
Right.
and
So
then-
Vermont was the only state
Yep.
that Trump didn't win,
Right.
and I think a lot of that had to do with certainly Governor Phil Scott, and a lot of our legislators were big supporters of Nikki Haley, and she came and did an event in the state. And one
Oh,
of the
I
things
know, I thought that was great.
I told every single presidential campaign I had contact with,
Right.
in the last at least 12 to 16 years I've been watching, any Republican who comes to Vermont gets delegates out of the state.
Right.
And Nikki took that more seriously than certainly any of the other candidates.
Yep.
She came here and was able to eke out a victory over Trump. But it was very narrow, right? I think Nikki Haley got 49% and Trump got maybe 44 or 43.
Right.
So it was a close race.
Yep.
But I think that's part of the leadership that Republicans are seeing from the governor was a factor in that. But yeah, literally the next day after the big win in Vermont,
Yeah, right.
Nikki gets out of the race,
Yeah.
and later on, as we got closer to the convention, she released all her delegates and encouraged them to support Donald Trump, which was not what happened in 2016. If you
Right.
remember, kind of the number 2 person was Ted Cruz.
Oh, right.
And he gets invited to the convention,
Yeah.
and he kind of ends with, vote your conscience, which was a little bit of a sleight of hand from
Yeah.
Trump. And Nikki Haley took a very different approach this time, especially after the assassination attempt on
Oh,
Donald
well,
Trump.
for sure, and I went, now, did you have to have a vote, because all of our delegates voted for Trump,
Mm-hmm.
and Malloy was the speaker for the
Yep.
group, and he did a very good job, excellent
He
job.
did, and I think one of the things that I got from what he had said there was there was a real theme of unity at the RNC convention,
right.
and and Gerald talked about that in his speech, and I think we've seen that at the national level. I feel like we're seeing that more and more at the state level compared to 4 and
Yep.
6 years ago.
Right.
People are recognizing that Phil Scott's our guy, and that although people will have differences of opinion on things that Governor Scott has done, even Republicans,
Right.
that he's been leading the state as best he can, and he needs help. And so I think compared to previous years, we've got more candidates for office who are involved with the focus of helping to support the governor and his agenda.
What are people's reluctance? You must know because they will talk to you about why they don't want to run. Is it because of what we hear about? I mean, I've experienced it, so I'm not too anxious to jump back in.
I think some of the things that I heard, especially recruiting Republicans, a while ago, was many were concerned that they didn't want to run with Trump at the top of the ticket.
Wow.
That's one thing I heard. I think that has changed certainly as we got.
Yeah.
Like I said, we've seen huge results.
Right.
During the primary, where we've had a lot more people come in later than normal. Another thing is it's just getting unaffordable to live here.
Yeah.
I had a great candidate lined up in the South Burlington area who had experience working on stuff with school budgets. They had had experience helping out in state government. They were all lined up. They came to a training we had done, and then I go to check the filing deadline and make sure everybody got their papers in. I didn't see his name there.
Oh.
So I sent him an email and I said, hey, I saw your name. Did you have trouble getting the signatures? We can still get you on the ballot. He said, no, I'm moving in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I basically didn't say it this way, but kind of like he's given up on Vermont. And I've had so many conversations, it just breaks my heart, especially with other young people,
Yeah,
like people
it's the
even
young
younger than
people.
me, who are like, I thought I was going to die here in Vermont, but I'm struggling.
Yeah, dying now.
I'm dying now, yeah. And they're saying, I don't know how I can live in Vermont. The kind of salaries that are available and the cost of living just don't match up. Right?
Right.
We've got a California cost of living here,
Yep.
but we don't have Silicon Valley salaries.
For sure.
And especially for young people who are just trying to break in, getting out of high school,
Yep.
getting out of college, there's not a lot of opportunity for them.
You know what else I found? I don't know what you can do about it, but when you run, you have to fundraise a lot for the house. I had to raise anywhere. I don't know if I had to, but in order to be competitive, I had to get $30,000 to $40,000 easy, and that was in Berlin, for heaven's sake. And then it goes up in Senate and statewide. Forget it.
Yeah.
100 something is, and this is Vermont. People just don't, and you keep bugging the same people,
Right.
and then you get mad if they can't give you anything. You're like, you get mad at these poor people trying to make a living themselves.
Yeah. I mean, you've got candidates and volunteers and even donors
Right.
are just in a tighter position now than they've ever been. And yet, at the same time, all of those people know it's never been more important. And it's just going to require a degree of sacrifice that none of us have given up to this point to get the kind of results that none of us have gotten up to this point.
Right. I wish there was something. I know they talk about being state funded, but I don't know how much money that gets you. Probably not enough to do much of anything.
Well, it's interesting. I've talked to my colleague in Connecticut. They have a public financing system there. Yeah, and what happens is everybody kind of gets the same amount. And from his perspective, right, if you ask the candidates, it might be different, but from his perspective, it actually incentivizes a lot of waste. Because
interesting.
if you know you're getting a check from the
what the heck?
government for whatever it is, the candidates don't value those donor dollars as hard, and there's zero accountability
Right,
with them.
well, that's true.
Right?
Right.
You don't have a donor calling you up saying, "Hey, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing that?" There's no. So there isn't any sort of guidance, and especially for first-time
Nobody's
candidates.
looking over your shoulder. They just want you to win.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you went to.
Well, they want you to win, but not a lot of people will tell you how to do it. And when you get
That's
one
true.
check from the state, there isn't a lot of guidance that comes with that.
That is very true.
In this scenario, if you've got donors, especially donors who have given before, and you've got a party that's raising money and,
Yep.
and evaluating candidates on who can and who can't raise money as well, it sends signals, right? I think you look at the primaries. If everybody gets the same amount, it has the potential to elevate candidates who really shouldn't be elevated, right?
Yes.
In
I was gonna
some
talk
of these
to you about
cases.
that.
Yeah, and then candidates. A lot of public financing systems have basically a cap. So if you're a good candidate and a lot of people like you and support you, you can't excel either.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. So you went. I'm so jealous. I have to tell you, the Pfizer. Is that how you pronounce it?
Pfizer Forum.
Pfizer
Yep.
Forum in Milwaukee, and that was on the 15th, and then is and then that day I kind of did a timeline thing. On the 15th, Trump announced that that through social media that he was choosing J.D. Vance,
Yep.
and then we cast our vote that same day, which was I watched it several times. I just thought it was so cool, the way the announcement was made and
Yep.
and the way Malloy just did the whole thing. It was great. But like you were saying, the enthusiasm, it was just contagious. It was really excellent. And then, of course, the next day was when Trump had already been shot. When you heard that he had been shot, what happened at how did they announce that?
Well, so
didn't they?
he had been shot at on Saturday.
Right.
And then, so
Monday
yeah.
was
So the week before, I was out there early as the state chair doing some stuff to prepare for the convention, and I didn't have anything going on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I flew home Wednesday night. I was on my couch, Saturday afternoon, getting ready to fly back the next morning, when I had heard the news about the assassination attempt on President Trump, and. There just wasn't a lot of information at first, and not even knowing like what kind of condition was the president in, and there's always been a high amount of security. I've been to a previous RNC convention, so I knew that really wasn't going to change. They're already got it up to 11.
Safe there.
Yeah, that was one of the safest places to be. So there wasn't a real concern there, but as I got to the convention on Monday, I thought, man, what a different place we could have been in. Because two other things could have happened, right? Trump could have been shot and killed instantly and died on Saturday without having named a vice presidential nominee at that point. I didn't find out about the nomination until Monday, in the middle of the roll call vote. That J.D. Vance had been the pick. And I had asked people the early Monday morning. Nobody knew. So the first thing is Trump hadn't appointed anyone as his vice president, and if he had died there, we would have been in absolute chaos 2 days later trying to figure out who do we put up instead. The other thing, which could have been even more difficult, was what if Trump had been shot and wounded and we just didn't have a clear idea 2 days later what his status or prognosis was going to be. There would have been a lot of pressure on the Republicans there to say, well, do we stick with the guy who won every single primary, or almost every single primary, or do we pick someone else? Because is he going to be able to serve? It could have been a very somber and contentious convention. But by the grace of God, it wasn't.
And then to have lose the father. Who was trying to protect his family, laid over them, and then I think there were two others who got wounded but didn't die. And it was. I swear I didn't leave the TV. I was glued to it and then as things were dripping out about the Secret Service and that woman who was in charge. Good thing I wasn't on that committee. I think I would have slapped her silly. It was so rude and so disrespectful.
And Trump is his own character, right? And there's a couple different ways he could have responded to that, right? If you believe, the narrative that the left paints that Trump is just an angry, hateful person, that's all that he's about, then you would have expected that caricature of him to come out and be like, I'm gonna get you, really, like, I can't believe people are trying to kill me. This is insane. That he could have been very angry about that. And I think what happened is what happened seemed to be the impossible thing, that maybe Trump actually got humbled a little bit.
Wow.
And I think I heard a little bit of that on Thursday night when he was speaking, because I think he recognized I shouldn't be here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because he knew immediately, though, although he went like this and he dropped immediately, and then of course all the Secret Service came piled on him. But when he came into the stadium, whatever it is, into the building for the first time, people must have gone nuts.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, it was his first public appearance
Yeah.
since the assassination attempt, and I think that was sort of one of the factors, right, in why the Republican convention was so unifying when in the past it has not been. At
Right,
least the two
right.
I've been to, was certainly you had this incredibly traumatic experience happen literally days before,
right.
and also you got to remember that Trump had done so well in the primaries that early on he consolidated support. And oftentimes what happens is, we don't know who the nominee is till we get to late April, sometimes early May.
right.
And so the people that run to be delegates to the convention, you'd have, your Nikki Haley group, and you'd have your Trump group, and you'd have your DeSantis group, and all those people all go to the convention. Because Trump had won so early, won so largely early on.
Right.
A lot of the Nikki Haley people weren't involved in the process that it takes to become a delegate. So most of the people in the convention center were already
Right.
solid Trump supporters. There's a couple states where the candidate gets to pick who goes, but Vermont is one of the states where we just identify Vermonters who have served and want to lead.
Yeah.
And we pick our people first, and we don't really let the campaigns get involved. Most states are like that. So that creates an environment in that convention center that the people who are there are the people who are really excited about the nominee.
I was watching a couple of the other stations, and they wanted to see, the bandage. That's just, I want to see, did he really get shot? Or what were they saying? It was a medal? It
Yeah,
was
a piece of teleprompter or something.
You get shot in front of the whole world. You think you're going to lie? It's like, seriously, it gives me a headache.
Yep.
So anyway, you had a fabulous time. What's
We
your
did.
takeaway from all of that experience? I'd be packed tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I think we came out, especially the first 3 days of the convention, were very much focused on everyday Americans. There were not as many congressmen and senators and governors.
You had real people.
You had real people
Right.
who were saying, "This is what my life has been like the last 3 years since Trump got out of office."
I was impressed with that.
And so you heard about single moms,
Yep.
and between her and her two sons, they had 6 jobs between the three of them. You heard
The ones that
families.
lost their children because of crime. Oh my
Right.
God! There was one woman on there, black woman. I was crying. I just said, how can she even talk? I gave her a lot of credit.
Yeah, and so the Trump campaign, the RNC, really put on display, we are listening to the American people,
Right.
and these are the kinds of problems that a lot of people are telling us about.
Yeah.
And it was a real solid way to demonstrate that we're listening to the average American. And then I think you contrast that with the Democratic convention.
It's got all the stars.
And people telling, trying to tell, you got Democrats trying to tell people, well, things are great. They've never been better.
Nobody's believing it. I hope to
And
God.
it's, I mean, I think that they believe that, but it's because so many Democrats are these high income, high net worth. I mean, J.D. Pritzker's a billionaire, and he bragged about it. That is not something that used to happen at Democratic conventions, bragging about being a billionaire.
Being wealthy wasn't really applauded much, was it?
Right. Yeah, it didn't used to be. But I think there's a degree to which the place that a lot of Democrats get their votes from are kind of insulated from the regular economy, right? They're in think tanks, and they're working for nonprofits that get state subsidies, so their income stays the same. It's the people that are working out in the economy that are seeing all this volatility.
And back home in D.C., of course, we had everybody trying to get the president to step down. When he stepped down after the convention?
Yes.
After, right?
Yeah.
When you guys got home.
Yep.
What was the talk in the convention about him stepping down?
I mean, there's been talk in Republican circles for 10 months that Joe Biden wasn't going to be the nominee.
Right.
And I had been a little skeptical of that. I thought that was a lot of wishful thinking. I mean, I knew that there were serious concerns around his cognitive abilities, but I thought that the media is going to continue to paper it over like they always had. And then even at the point where they had the debate, and to see the media turn on a Democrat like that is something I have never seen before in my life.
Right.
And so it was a really interesting 2 or 3 weeks, the longest positive news cycle for Republicans.
I've always wondered
ever.
how much true information was being given when he was in the White House, because I didn't dislike Joe Biden because when he was in the Senate and working with Clinton, he was sort of a moderate. At least I thought so. And I wasn't that unhappy. I thought, well, at least we've got a moderate in there.
Yep.
And then, of course, the progressives got a hold of him. And I wonder how much truth he really knew about the border, about the cost of living. I'm not so sure they were being totally honest with him, because I think he would have been upset with some of the things. Don't you agree?
It very well could be.
Somebody was pulling the strings.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's alarming when you've got information being filtered to the chief executive officer of the country. You know, my wife's from Romania, and she would talk about how all the people around their dictator Ceausescu would only tell him the positive things because everyone was afraid of him.
Of course. Right.
And so when you're a leader, and everyone around you is telling you everything's great, and you're not really interacting with regular people. Why
wouldn't you believe them, right?
Why wouldn't you believe that? And so, did that happen with Joe Biden? I think there's a potential for that, because again, if you've got your cabinet and a friendly news media who aren't really challenging you, or there's one guy who challenges you and you can just brush him off, it shapes the way that you govern. And I think that's an advantage that Republicans have, and one of the reasons that Republican governors are running states much better than Democratic governors are is that they're used to getting pushback from the press, pushback from left-leaning groups. And so they have to take that negative feedback, integrate it into their leadership approach, and move forward. Gavin Newsom doesn't have to do that. Everyone pats him on the back, tells him he's doing great, and he surrounds himself with that same kind of yes men, because Democrats are not very good about bringing in different opinions. And I think that was another thing I picked up at the convention. To have the Teamsters Union president at a Republican convention was kind of a big deal. And that whole day, there were other cases where you could tell Trump was bringing in people that didn't agree with him. I mean, Nikki Haley said, I don't agree with him a bunch of the time. And so I think you're seeing that Republicans are usually building stronger governance decision-making groups because they're more willing to hear things that are different. And Democrats tend to be in favor of censorship and narrowing, and don't tell me anything I don't want to hear. I can't listen to you because of who you are.
I think Trump welcomes that. He seems to come alive when you're disagreeing with him, because he sort of likes the give and take. And I'm not sure he likes yes men so much.
Yeah, I think there's been reports that's certainly been a part of even before he was running for office. That's how he'd run his companies.
So when Biden stepped down, and obviously we've turned, I really thought Gavin Newsom was going to, I really thought he was going to be the guy. I wasn't happy about that. But I thought because he seemed to have been working on it, but Kamala surprised me.
Well, what surprised me is I got to the end of the convention, I thought, man, this has been such a great convention. Republicans are for the most more together now than we've ever been. I thought the pressure is going to be off of Joe Biden to step down, because I think Democrats are going to see, man, it's just let him stick him with the loss, and we're going to start over in 4 years. But that's not what happened, and I think that might be one of the reasons that Kamala has been accepted so quickly, because a lot of the people that could have competed with her, like Gavin Newsom, like Josh Shapiro, like Gretchen Whitmer, those people are looking at this race thinking,
not this year.
Yeah, I don't think I want to get in on this. I mean, who wants to run a race this late to become the presidential nominee in August? That's pretty late. I mean, every other candidate has been running for at least a year, building name recognition.
Well, when I had Gerald Malloy on the show, I don't know what, because he ran a couple of years ago for the Senate, U.S. Senate. And I was thinking, I started writing a list down, and I put it on my Facebook of all the things that are wrong, seriously wrong. The border, the cost of living. I mean, I had a list, Paul. It was scary, and I thought, who wants to tackle all this stuff. It's just, there's no safe place that says, here, we're doing this great. There is a laundry list that impacts everybody.
Yeah.
And I put it on my Facebook, and people started to add to it. And at this point, I'm like, stop. Well, thank you very much, but just stop. It's very depressing.
Yeah, yeah.
What's happening here?
And that's what's been interesting to watch the Democratic convention this week. And they're almost running like Trump's the incumbent, and Kamala is supposed to be bringing hope and change.
Yeah, hope and change. They never say how, because every one of those things I had down on my list was, crime alone, and they pick a city like Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, what were they? I don't know what they thought they were going to get out of it, but I mean, why highlight a city that isn't working? I would have gone to a city that's run by a Democrat.
Which one, Pat?
Well,
that's the problem.
Minor problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they don't have anything.
Less than Chicago.
They don't have one single city that's run by a Democrat that they can say, hey, isn't this wonderful?
Right.
I mean, whether it's Chicago or San Francisco, I mean, New York, I mean, all of the major cities that used to be like a sense of pride, right? Like if you go back to like the 80s and early 90s, you'd say New York and people would,
for sure.
their chests would pop up. You know, even if you're not from New York, you like feel like, that's
but
part of
even
America.
Chicago, the Miracle Mile, sign me up.
Right.
I've been there shopping and going to conventions and conferences and stuff.
Yep.
I wouldn't go there anymore.
No, it's a very different place.
So you've been very busy here back home. You were talking about getting folks to run, and you've been doing training for them?
Yeah, we've done some limited training compared to what I've done 2 years ago. Part of it is my efforts up to the primary have been 100% getting candidates on the ballot.
Right.
Because once that door closes on primary day, and we don't have the opportunity to write people in or put them on the appointment process, you're playing with half a deck. Right? I mean, that's what happens if we were at that point where we still only had 69 House members or candidates, right? That means even if we won 100% of our races, which is impossible, we couldn't get a majority, right?
Yeah, I wish people would understand how important that is. I know that, you're Republican, I don't want to vote for you, but they don't get how better it would be for them if there was a balance. And it sounds like I'm just trying to push, Republicans, but it's the truth. And when there's such an imbalance, it doesn't work for anybody.
Yeah. And I think that you may see more and more people who have previously voted Democrat really getting to the end of their rope. And I think a couple things that I look at the results of the primary 2 years ago, especially, but it's continued this year, is that moderates cannot win a primary on the Democratic side.
Right.
They can't. I mean, you look at Molly Gray lost, Chris Winters, obviously the more experienced person, lost. I mean, he was the deputy Secretary of State. And even this year, Stuart Ledbetter, for 20 years, he's been reaching out to the community across Vermont. He ran an issues-focused campaign. He talked about housing and affordability, and he kept it clean. He did everything that you textbook example.
Yeah, I was very surprised that Stuart, I was waiting to get him on the show after he won.
And then one of the people that beat him was someone who is a literal socialist, right? I know a lot of other Republicans throw that term around, but Tanya Vahovsky has been endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, right? This is the same group that endorsed Maduro in Venezuela, but thought the AOC was too moderate and they wouldn't endorse her.
Whoa! And Tanya got endorsed.
And Tanya got endorsed and beat Stuart Ledbetter. So one of the things I've said is that if you are a centrist, if you are a moderate, the Democrats have no place for you in their primaries.
We used to have the Blue Dogs here. Were you involved with? It was a group. I don't know how many of those. God mostly men that would vote with the Republicans
like Jim Condon.
sometimes. Yeah, and they would put a bill over because they would vote with us. Because they had common sense. It just wasn't always right or left.
But now all those people, I think, are realizing if they want to still govern from the middle and just take a common sense approach, the place that exists for them is in the Republican Party. And I think that the sort of the hallmark of that is John Rogers' campaign. John Rogers had been a Democrat for over a decade and realized that the party has left him. The party is not about what it was when John was a
Right,
Democrat.
right.
And so John's made that switch, and I think there's going to be a lot of other voters who are
Feel
your
the same.
Kennedy, your John F. Kennedy Democrat type
Right.
people who said, yeah, I was a Democrat for a while, but there's just something different about this group of people.
Yeah,
and
it's not the Democrat Party of your mother or father or whoever.
It's
just
not.
changed.
And they seem just very removed from the concerns of everyday people. I mean, one of the we had the Unaffordable Heat Act, right? Absolute record amounts of constituent communication.
Yes.
People reaching out to their House
More
member.
than abortion, believe it or not.
More than abortion.
Yeah.
And I had some legislators tell me they hadn't seen anything like that since civil unions.
Yeah.
Sort of like the most amount of communication in 25 years, in a quarter century. And there's Philip Bruce saying, don't listen to those people, we've got to keep going.
We know what you need.
Yeah, and it just reinforces the fact that Democrats don't listen to their constituents. They have their own idea.
Yeah.
They're not listening to the governor. They're not listening to the people that call them or send them emails. They are doing what they're going to do, and it's got to stop. The only way to stop that is to stop electing these incumbent Democrats who voted against the interests of their own people and start electing Republicans who are connected to their community.
Somebody's putting on a really good notice on Facebook. They're taking a picture of each legislator that voted,
Yep.
and saying this person voted yes or for the Clean Heat Act, and which is good because nobody pays
Yeah,
attention.
and it's, I mean, that's all above the belt, right?
Yeah.
If you vote for something, at the very least, you should be willing to stand
Yep,
and say
and say,
that,
"That's
yes,
what I
I
did."
voted for that. This isn't a lot of petty stuff, and the national scene gets ugly, but it's, it's a case where I think a lot of people don't know how their legislator votes. When they come around, they knock
don't.
on the door, they say all these wonderful things,
Yeah.
they think, hey, he's a nice guy, she's a sweet lady.
She always comes to all our events.
Right.
What does that
right.
mean? How do they vote?
Right, yeah, if somebody is always coming to your events, but they don't listen to what you're saying and they don't take that information and have it inform their vote,
Right.
then the fact that they come is actually patronizing,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
You just say, oh yeah, I'm going to come listen to
that's
you, but I'm going to
for me
vote
'cause I'm
however I
wonderful.
want. Yeah.
But they don't listen, you're right. But you guys have latched onto a slogan this
Mm-hmm.
year, which I think is great, and it's "Get Real," all dots after each
Yeah.
one of those letters.
Yep.
And I have a cheat sheet here.
Yep.
But you're going to tell me what they.
Yeah,
what
so
they-
I got to give 100% of the credit to this goes to Bill Huff, who is
Great.
he's been candidate for Senate. He's helping us out in Orange County. This was, he listened to the governor's State of the State address.
Yeah.
And thought, man, I agree with everything the governor just said, and I feel like there's a way we can make that our campaign issue. And so Bill sat down that same night, hammered out, the basis of what is Get Real, and other people have contributed. He's been, been very open to getting feedback and making it better because he wants us all to win and to succeed. And so the idea is that Get Real is a set of basic principles that the Republican Party is focused on, right? Because there's 100 different things you could run on, but these
Right.
are the 7 things that if Republicans are able to get a majority or at least get more leverage in the lawmaking process that we're going to focus on. So the first one, G, is the Global Warming Solutions Act. There are major problems with that bill. One of the
for
things
sure.
we just saw is that we already have a lawsuit pending. Part of the Global Warming Solutions Act was an invitation to anybody with a big law firm, come sue the state of Vermont, we're going to pay your legal bills,
Right.
and we're basically going to let you tell us what policy we have to put in place. Okay, so that's G is Global Warming Solutions Act. E from Get Real is education. That is the number one issue for people, property taxes. The student population has gone down, but property taxes are going up by double digits, and it's not going to stop. There's no reason to think that what happened this year is a one and done thing. So we've got global warming solutions, education. The T is transportation. We have got to, one of the best ways that we can fight the impacts of a changing environment is to build better roads and bridges. We've seen so much flooding wiping out important infrastructure especially here in Washington County. And a lot of money is getting wasted on things like bike paths. And then if you're driving from St. Johnsbury to Montpelier on Route 2, it's brutal, right? R is regulatory reform, especially related to housing. We spend a ton of money on housing. And back when I was in the legislature 10 years ago, there's a ton of money spent on housing.
That's the answer. The housing is Act 250, and it just is. But they can yell and scream all they want, but that's the deal.
Well, that's the thing is we've got millions of dollars sitting on the sideline, but it doesn't do anyone good if there's no house to buy. And we've got to build the houses so that people can live in them.
Yep.
And then the other E is for environment. Again, repurposing a lot of our environmental laws to create incentives instead of penalties, right? So part of the Affordable Heat Act is there's a penalty. There's going to be a $1, $2, $3 gallon charge, penalty charge. And then A is affordability. We've seen 3 or 4 major tax or fee increases of double digits. DMV fees went up 20%.
And they call it a fee. I hate to tell you, if you raise every DMV, it impacts everybody. That's a tax.
That's right.
Sorry.
Yeah. So there's that. There's a new payroll tax. There's more property taxes, and Vermonters can't afford it anymore. And then the last letter is L for law and order. It is disgusting what has happened to Vermont. When I was a kid, Vermont was the safest place in the country.
Exactly, number
one.
one.
And did you know that now, according to a study I had seen a couple weeks ago, of the top 10 most dangerous cities, violent crime per capita,
don't tell me.
Burlington's number 7, and Rutland's number 8.
Paul.
Vermont is the only state that has 2 cities in the top 10 most dangerous, which is calculated by violent crime per capita. Now we're smaller, so that's a factor.
But still, we were never there.
But like even I was reading, I get the Wilson Observer where I live, and a month or two ago I was reading about a carjacking in Williston, Vermont. I mean, I just never had heard of anyone getting carjacked in Vermont. That's a New York City or an LA thing.
Well, you know, I work with Campaign for Vermont, and we put out a survey, and the top 5 most important things to people, crime was one of them, and that never has happened ever. That crime was number 3, I think, after education and cost of living.
Yeah.
I mean, there it is.
Yeah.
And in Vermont.
I know.
It's just staggering to me. I used to go to Burlington. Now I think twice about going there.
And it is absolutely directly tied to policies pursued by Democrats and especially progressives in Burlington, right? If you look at the most dangerous places in the state, it's the place where the progressives have the biggest influence. Not only did the Burlington City Council defund the police department, right? They changed course, but they're still working themselves out of that hole. But now they're inviting crime with the passage of this recent bill to put a safe injection site.
Oh,
you know,
did they pass? Oh, wow!
There's $1 million that's going to go to Burlington to build a place
pilot,
where we are asking people come here and violate federal law and illegally use substances here.
I had a gentleman on that I've known for a long time. He was an addict and is not an addict for 38 years. I think he's managed, and he was very supportive of that safe harbor, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose was so that they don't die, because we have a lot of people that are dying. But I could not, in my head, I was very respectful and I let him talk his thing, but I couldn't get my head around why would we do that.
And that's the thing, is I don't want anyone to die
No,
either.
for sure.
Nobody does. Yeah. But the question is this the best approach? Right? And the other thing is, if we're spending $1 million on that, and it's $1 million that we're not spending on treatment that we know works, are we doing the right thing with Vermont taxpayer money?
Because you can't make these people go to treatment. If they don't want to go, you just give them the drugs and watch that they don't die and leave. And they said, well, if you make them go to treatment, they won't come.
Yep.
They'll just say, no, thanks, I don't need it.
Well, that's what is the purpose of the spending? The purpose is to help people get off of drugs.
Right,
If the purpose is just to keep people alive and keep them doing drugs, I don't think that's the way Vermont taxpayers are expecting their money to be spent.
Well, then we had a program where we were giving them sort of synthetic drugs,
Buprenorphine.
buprenorphine, thank
Yep.
you. That made a little more sense to me because you could kind of talk to them and get them coming back. You'd see them often enough to maybe talk them into getting some help. But
And I feel like a lot has changed since this sort of the hub and spoke model. Because
Oh,
I was
right,
on
right.
Human Services Committee
were
when
you?
we were
'cause
dealing with that.
that received national attention. They thought it was a great concept.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for the time that it existed, it worked pretty well. But I think also COVID and all of the shutdowns,
course.
just, that program required a little bit of momentum and maintenance.
you're
And when it
right.
got shut down, I think people disrupted that good pattern that was working for them. And it's just been hard to get
I
back.
forget, for
back
some
in
reason,
that.
I forget about that 2-year time lapse where everything
Because it's a
stood
trauma.
still.
We all want to
Yeah, right.
suppress it, right? We don't want to
Exactly.
remember what
Do
it was
not
like.
talk to me about masks
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
So we only have about a little less than 10 minutes. Your platform is very different than in years past.
Yeah.
And it's concise, it's short, and it's focused on all the things we've been talking about. And if I can really quickly, personal liberty, personal responsible government, education, healthcare, affordability, safety, infrastructure, and environment. And not so much on the social issues. And I think this makes so much sense.
Yeah. I do too. It was a little contentious when we did this back in May. Obviously, there's people who wanted to see a ton of different things in here. But when we looked at, I spent a lot of time listening to our legislators, right? Because to me, one of the questions you always got to ask is, what is the platform for? There's some people who think the platform is the bulletin board on which everybody gets to post their idea.
Right.
And I think that what the platform is, especially as we were doing it in May, is to say, here's a general idea of the kind of people we want to recruit as candidates. And if we win, this is what we want to do.
Right.
And so if that's what the goal is, if that's sort of what the value proposition is to voters, if you elect Republicans, this is what they're going to do. You can't have everybody put their own
right.
individual idea because we
Right,
just
right.
can't do it.
Right.
I mean,
That's the Get Real slogan.
Right.
Get real, people.
right, and that's why.
What can you do?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, get real is these are the things every Republican agree on. Republicans do not agree on abortion.
Right.
We just don't. There's some people who, have views that life begins at conception,
Right.
and those are very dearly held views. And we have plenty of, Governor Phil Scott got endorsed by Planned Parenthood.
right.
And so we have a lot of pro-choice Republicans. So we just said that is something that's divided the party. And especially now that it's been changed in the Vermont Constitution, that that's not something we can promise because we can't all agree where we are on that.
Right.
So there's 7 other things that we can all agree on.
Yeah.
Let's focus on
Let's
those.
fix what we can fix.
And I think it was I felt a little bit vindicated when I got to the convention and see that the same thing had happened to the national platform. This is, again, something that used to be a 60-page document.
Right, exactly. I remember that, reading
And
it.
you got down to 20 bullet points.
Right.
I was talking to the Chris LaCivita, the campaign manager, and he said they start out with 10,
Right.
and Trump wanted to add a few things. He's like, all right, but 20 is it.
Yeah.
And those are things that, again, focus on what Republicans want to do, what they're unified together on. And I think it takes a little bit of the false attacks away from Democrats who throw things that are just patently untrue. Oh, if you elect a Republican, then
yeah, right,
we're
right.
going back to 1920
Right,
and
right.
coat hanger abortions and all that kind of stuff. And it's just that's not an accurate reflection of the Republican Party in Vermont. And so, we took a little bit of heat for that, but to me, the platform we have is accurately reflecting the candidates that we have.
Right.
And that to me is important.
That's great. Because every one of these, if we don't have this list work right, we're not in a very good shape. Education, our kids are just,
Yeah.
we're not getting our return on investment, as they say. And do you know we do not have a statewide, what's the word I'm looking for, common theme of what it means to graduate. And it's up to each school. And I don't think Vermont should have its own, this is what you need to graduate. I know there's a word for it, which I'm forgetting, but, and that's what you aim for. But each school can make up their own. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some state standards that say here are things that every lesson you have should be hitting on some of these different things. I mean, I have a background in education, graduated from UVM with a degree in secondary
good for you.
education. So I got to know all about the Vermont education standards. To me, I think the bigger issue is what I found is I can write that as on the footnote of my lesson plan.
Yeah, right.
But it doesn't mean that the kids actually know and understand what that thing is that I'm trying to teach, whether it's math or history or whatever, you know.
Did you actually teach? Did you spend time teaching?
Yeah, I did my student internship in Burlington High School, and then I realized that I didn't. Public education was not for me. I loved the kids. I loved the kids, and I had some great kids, but it was a teacher's lounge that just I was not a fan of. It just was a really negative environment for my experience.
Yeah.
Now, since then, I've been teaching at a private school part-time. So I'm still using my math degree there. And what I've seen in the private schools is, first of all, I mean, the tuition is 1/4 of what our cost is on public education. But the thing that I think, Democrats will always say, well, how do you get that? Can you bring that into the public school? And I said, what happens is it kind of works more like a co-op. The teachers in a small independent school have a lot more influence. And in a public school, there's the union president, and then there's the vice principal, and the principal, and the superintendent, and the superintendent finance. There's all these layers of administration that don't help kids learn what they need to learn, and they don't help the school become a better learning environment.
I taught a year of civics at the at a school, a private school, and I walked into the class and I knew half the kids anyway. But the teacher blew a whistle, and I turned around, and everybody was sitting down, hands folded, ready to learn. I'm like, whoa, where am I? It was incredible. I had the best year ever. Yeah, Mrs. McDonald, and not hey you. And I had the most fun. And when I was teaching certain things, the parents came to the class because they don't teach civics, so they didn't know the answers to some of this stuff, and the parents came. But the kids were amazing. I was like, I love you all. I'm going to adopt you. But so, do you get actively involved in the policy? Does the GOP have policy stances, or?
We really leave that up to our legislators. Part of it is we need to make sure that the Republicans, the Republicans who should be making policy decisions are the ones who can win because they represent their communities. And when we have Republicans winning, representing their communities, those are the best people to be making policy. And I think Scott Beck is, I'll put another plug in for him as our Senate candidate. He's one of the most knowledgeable, thoughtful people I know who understands education, finance system.
That's great. We'll have to get him on the show.
Absolutely.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. We're going to have a whole series of candidates, so you'll get to see them. Democrat and Republican. We're reaching out to both sides, but maybe we'll work together and get some folks on the show.
I'd love to help.
You're doing a great job, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll see you next week. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites.